Jennifer Cook and Shaheen Matuni.
Shaheen Matuni.
Thank you. And they have a math presentation on vertical alignment that I listened to in the fall and was walked away very excited by the information that they shared, and I thought it would be great for all of y'all to hear it too. So they are going to make that presentation for us.
My name is Jennifer Cook. I work at the high school, and I'm the math department chair, and I teach pre-AP pre-calculus and AP calculus. So I get them at the other end of the cycle from when y'all have them. And I will say this about our program at Kennedale: most of the kids that I get in calculus are 13-year seniors. Or have been in Kennedale for a long time. And I think that speaks volumes for our math program as it is. That so many kids who've come through Kennedale are capable of college level calculus. And they are capable. We have a lot of success in my calculus class. So I think that's to be commended. I've taught, this is my 14th year, it's my 8th year here in Kennedale. I taught at LDville High School before I came here. I didn't like it. They were a trimester. I hated it. That's another story. But before that, I taught at Duncanville High School, which is one of the largest high schools in the state. That's where I started my teaching career. So kind of moved my way down to what I'm comfortable with, which is 3A. It's the kind of school that I graduated from. So, Shaheen, you want to tell them a little bit about yourself real quick?
Yeah, so this is my 6th year in the district. I've never set foot in this campus until just like right now. My wife's at Delaney, so I've spent a lot of time over there. But I've been teaching computer science. I started the computer science here in Kennedale. I started the program. I also teach math. Some of you have introduced yourself as I've taught your student. I love Kennedale. I mean, you can't. This is like the greatest place ever. I'm never going to leave. I moved right across from the school. I sold my other car and I walk to school every day. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm setting up shop. So I'm excited to be here too to share with you guys what we're wanting to just promote.
Okay, so when was it? Last spring or was it 2 springs ago? I can't even keep track now. When we were starting to talk about the transition from tax to STAR, and we were already concerned because we weren't having the success that we wanted, at least at the high school level, on tax. And now we're going to go to this more rigorous STAR test. We really kind of started to get into a panic about, okay, we really need to try to figure out what our issues are so we can address them. So I'm going to kind of go over some of the things that we found, the numbers stuff, to kind of illustrate what we perceive the problem to be. And then I'll talk a little bit about some basic solutions to kind of get us started that we've kind of come up with, and Shaheen has a lot more. He's more of the solution guy, and I'm more of the numbers gal. So our goal is to have a successful math program, K through 12 in Kennedale, even more successful than we are right now. It's not that we aren't successful now, but we want to be even more successful. And so what we want to do is come up with a process of growth in their knowledge and in the things, how we teach things, and all of that from K through 12. Click it. So the 3 aspects that are required for alignment. We have to have an alignment of knowledge and skills, which the TEKS do for us. We also have the KILGO scope and sequence that helps with that. We also want to align the materials that we use to teach them. So that's something that we'll work on as a vertical team. The big one that we want to make our main focus to start with is the second one. Coordination of teaching practices used to deliver instruction. How y'all explain or introduce something in 2nd grade, we want to know that in high school so that we can draw on that prior knowledge. Because you guys do a great job, but if we don't know how you taught it and the words you used and how you introduced it, then it's like reinventing the wheel when we try to bring it back up in class. So we want to align those teaching practices, and then improve our assessment practices that we use to validate learning and validate our instruction, which hopefully, I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the STAR test doing that, but hopefully some of the standardized tests will do that, but we'll also do that in our vertical team too. Like I said, our main focus is going to be coordinating our teaching practices right now. So when we started kind of disaggregating this data a couple of springs ago, we started looking at our tax scores. And we looked at what was the required score to meet the standard on the different grade level tax tests. and then what percent that actually converted to, and it's really not very good. These scores, if you had these scores on some kind of an assessment in your class, that would not meet your standard. That's way below what our standard for our students is. But this is what the state tells us the standard is, and this is what we hold ourselves to. And then this is the percentage of our kids that meet that standard. So it looks pretty good. But in order for them to be successful as they move up the math chain, only mastering 56% isn't going to cut it. If this 7th grader only gets 56% of their 7th grade math, when they go to 8th grade, that 8th grade math teacher is in a pickle because that kid knows only half of what they should have known. Because the TEKS are designed that when you go to the next set of TEKS, they assume you mastered the ones before, but the test doesn't assume that. And so it creates this real problem. So we decided maybe a better thing to look at would be the kids who got commended, and that should be how we measure our success of our program and of our district. And so when we looked at those numbers, they're still not great, but they're a lot better as far as what was required to be commended. But when we look at how many of our students are meeting that level, it's not very good. And so we kind of decided that really the way that the test is scored is the problem. So we dug a little bit deeper. And we looked at how this was going, or how this translated to, okay, we know that on the TAKS test, they don't test every TEK. So mastering, getting 56% on the TAKS test means you got 56% of what was tested. They didn't test everything. So when we went and looked at what percent of the TEKs were actually tested in each grade level, and then we applied the standard to that, this is what percent of the TEKs they actually had to master. And you can see for us at the high school level, it was really bad because in 10th and 11th grade, they aren't tested over their grade level TEKs at all. Nothing on the 10th or 11th grade TAKS is grade level. And so they're in 10th grade to pass 10th grade TAKS, I'm good, I'm ready to go to 11th grade math. That's not what that TAKS test means at all for a 10th grader. Passing the 10th grade TAKS does not mean you're ready for 11th grade math. It means that after spending an extra year going over 8th and 9th grade math, you got a little bit better at it. You got good enough to pass the 10th grade test. It doesn't mean you're ready for 11th grade. And so we looked at this, and then again at the percent of our kids who are committed. So you're talking about our 11th graders taking a test that has no 11th grade math, a little bit of 10th grade math, a lot of 9th grade, and a little bit of 8th grade. And only 19% of our kids are committed on it. Yeah.
Okay, I teach kindergarten. So
Yes.
I just want to
I know, this is a lot of numbers.
Okay, so when they get to 10th grade,
Yes.
they're only tested through 9th grade material.
Yes.
And when they get to 11th grade, they're only tested through
a little bit of
10th
10th
grade.
Yeah.
A little bit of
A
10th
little
grade.
bit of 10th grade.
Why?
That's the way that the old TAKS test was set up. So you can see how we're like in a panic because we see how poorly our students are doing on a test that is not testing anything new. It's things that they've seen for 2 and 3 years, and they're still not getting it. It's so nice that y'all are as appalled by this as we were. So it's and the thing is like you look at this and you're like, well, I don't teach those grades, but how our kids do is reflective of our program and of our system. So our system is kind of broken. We've done the best that we can with what we had, but we've got to do better because it's just not cutting it. So we go to the next one. So then we looked at, okay, so what's going to happen when we go to STAR? All right, so we have all these numbers again. So these are the same numbers that were on the last slide. What percent of the TEKs are actually on the TAKS test, and what percent it took of those TEKs to actually master or meet the standard, same thing for committed. And then we looked at, well, how many of the TEKs are going to be on the STAR? So this is what percent of the TEKs are on TAKS, and this is what percent of the TEKs are going to be on the STAR. So our 10th and 11th graders who've never been tested on grade level TEKs will now be tested on 100% of their grade level TEKs. So all of those TEKs are going to be tested.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh my.
But there is good news because even though they're going to make this really rigorous test, that our kids are, we're in a panic because they are going to be testing all these TEKs. If you go to the next slide, they don't have to do well at all on that test to pass it. The system is failing our students. This system is set up to give the impression that kids know more than they do. And it's okay that we understand it, but the kids and their parents don't get it. When they get that report, all they check and see is, did my kids pass it? They passed it. So when they go to the next math class, it's got to be this teacher's fault. Because my kid passed their math test last year. They knew math, and now they don't know math in your class, so it has to be you. And that's not it at all. On the STAR test, on phase 1, the Algebra 1 STAR test, it only took 37% right to pass, to be what's called level 2, which is the new mean standard for passing. So odds are on a multiple choice test that you get a 25 if you just guess. So they only have to get 12% more than a guesser to pass.
And we had 27% that couldn't, no, 23% that couldn't do that.
Couldn't make that.
They
Couldn't make that grade.
In phase 2, which comes in, I think in 2014, 2015, it'll be 50%. But even when we get to the final phase in of the level 2, it's only going to be 63%. So they still, what we would in our classrooms consider failing, will be meeting the standard when we are at Panoramic for the Algebra 1 STAR. And then for commended, it's 78%. So the level 3, which is supposed to be the outstanding level, they only have to do 78%, master 78% of the teams. So, you know, this would be like what we would consider like the bare minimum of what we would want, and the state is saying that's the greatest thing that could happen. Same thing with the geometry. The phase-in level 1 was 35%. Even when we get to the full level, it's only 60% on geometry, 77% for commended, and then on the Algebra 2, it's 38%. When we get to the final phase, it'll be 60%. This one they actually have to, Algebra 2, they actually, I think, have to score a little bit higher to actually get credit for it, so it's kind of strange.
Would this be comparable to elementary school? The
Like the
percentages?
percentages?
And the,
That's a
you
good
know,
question.
passing math?
Would that be,
Yeah,
would that be comparable to what our?
57% in math, they passed level 1.
I mean, I would be
Percentages.
interested to
It was-
see for
yeah,
elementary school.
57% was third
brought
and fourth
down
grade.
to-
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we can.
Yeah, we could sort that out.
Just something else for you to have to do.
No,
Because I
we
can
like
figure
it.
it out.
We like that. We like that. We like that. Y'all have it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this system is creating this false sense of security in our students, in our community, and our parents, because we're so used to pass fail, and that pass means 70%, and that doing great means you got an A, you got 90%, and that's not at all what those things mean in this
This
system.
needs to be a mandatory parent.
I know. We're talking about some things that we're talking about putting something like kind of like a podcast or something on the website where parents can get information about what when you get that grade
Right.
report, that test report, what does that really mean?
That-
Because they cannot accept level 2 as they need to understand that their kid will still need help in math if they're getting level 2.
Right.
Well, they're gonna graduate and go to college
Yes.
and completely
Yes,
be lost.
Yes, and I when we did this back in the summer and we were doing like a longer training, I know that this is in the afternoon in the middle of the week, so we didn't want to drag this out. But we had a news article that talked about that TCC says, I think it was 40% of their incoming freshmen have to take a remedial math class, and they specifically mentioned kids from Kennedale in that. The kids from Kennedale, they said Kennedale, Everman, Fort Worth, like they specifically mentioned our district. It was really embarrassing to me when I read it. I was like, oh, I don't like to think about our kids having, and that's frustrating for parents in the community that they thought all along their kid did good, and then they have to pay for a remedial class that their kid's not getting college credit for, and so that's frustrating. Yeah.
I graduated from Kennedale, and I made all A's, passed the tax or whatever I took with commended, and I get to college, and I got a B in math because I just didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And I thought, college all is. Yes, it was. So I thought I was prepared.
Well, and it's something, that we have to make sure that, the administrators, we've met with them and they're on board with this too, that the old idea of if a kid passes tax, they should also pass her class isn't necessarily true. Because the standard for passing STAR or EOC or whatever you want to call it is so much lower than it should be in our classes. So the two don't really relate.
It's not even the minimum expectation of what you would expect in a classroom.
No, not at all. Not at all. So we kind of, and we have to break those ties in our minds too, of, you know, I can't fail this kid because they passed their star. I mean, that's something that will have to be addressed, of course. You know, how are we going to deal with kids that passed their star but didn't pass the class? But it's something that we do have to address. We can't just keep going, oh, okay, those two things go together. I'll just let them sweep on through, because the result is they get to high school and they have these huge gaps, and it's hard for us to fill up. The best time to fill them is early. So unfortunately, that's going to put a lot of the burden on you guys, but we know that y'all are up for the task because you're so amazing. So, so that's what but we're here to help. Like our goal is to help, not to just say, okay, fix the problem now that you know what it is. We want to help fix the problem too. And there's stuff that can be done on our end too. So can we go to the next one? All right, so the test isn't the problem. The way it's scored is the problem. The test actually tests our TEKS. So the test doesn't test our program, it tests the TEKS. So we have to make sure that our program fits the TEKS. If we teach our TEKS and we teach them thoroughly in the way that they're written, into the rigor and the level that they're written, and we hold our kids accountable for them in the way that they should be, the test will be a breeze. They'll go in and knock the socks off the test. But we can't have that minimum be our goal anymore, for our kid to pass STAR. Our goal is our kids knock the roof off the STAR test. That they go in, they come back out and go, why did we have all these pep rallies and assemblies and jazz them up for this? That was easy. That's what we want for our kids. Shaheen's going to talk more about this in a minute. It's his baby. But we have to stop mechanizing their learning as much as possible. And he'll tell you a little bit more about what that means. But mechanization has a place, but it shouldn't take the place of cognition. So we're all guilty of it. Shaheen and I talked about, he was teaching inequalities in his class and graphing inequalities. And we've all done it. I've taught inequalities, and I've told my kids this before, that you just shade the way the arrow points. So if the arrow points to the right, you shade to the right. If it points to the left, you shade to the left. That's mechanization. We're not explaining to them why they shaded right. We're just telling them a little trick for remembering which way to shade. And so it's okay to teach them the trick, but after you've explained why the trick works. And so that he'll talk some about that. Teach students using academic vocabulary, not student-friendly language as much as possible, and require your students to think every day. If they haven't thought that day, then you haven't done your job that day. So that's something that we're working on at the high school. We tend to forget that sometimes, so that's when I focus for us. You want to go to the next one? Mm-hmm. This is an example of like non-academic vocabulary and a little bit of mechanization, and I saw this on Pinterest. If you use this, I did not get this from anybody but this parent. I'm not trying to pick on anybody. But, and I've done one like this, but I wanted to pick one that would make sense if you haven't taken practice tomorrow. So this was a trick for remembering what to do when you're adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing fractions. And it's cute, but I don't know that a kid will remember. Like, there's no way to associate applesauce with multiplication. Like, they don't really tie together. So, yeah, they might in their head remember all this stuff about crisscrossing and applesaucing, but they won't remember what operation it goes with, and they won't remember what applesauce means. And so this is a mechanization that in the end, while it may serve a temporary purpose, can actually hurt the kids' learning. So it's this kind of thing that we want to try to replace. We're not saying, oh, you can never do this again. We just want to try to find something better. Okay, so we need to fill the gaps in our program, but first we have to find them. And so that's one of the things we're going to look at. We look at why does the gap exist, and then the big thing we want to do is create like this community from K through 12 where we share ideas and activities and lessons, things that we find online, things that we've used in our classroom for years with great success, where we're not having to reinvent the wheel, where we create like this pool of knowledge. We want to make sure that everybody understands their TEKS and that they're teaching the TEKS as they're written. And we can't be afraid to say that we don't know. I've taught for 14 years and I know that I don't know everything, and I would think that people that have taught longer don't feel that way either. So we can't be afraid to bear our weaknesses and say, look, I've used this lesson for a while because I didn't have anything better and I understood it, but I know it's not really serving my kids. Can you help me find something better? And we can't be afraid to say that. And we can't be afraid that we're going to be judged by our colleagues that, oh, she doesn't have any business teaching. She doesn't know how to teach that or whatever. Like, we need to be supportive. And then more rigor, which is what the test touts. means that the most difficult part of the teams which haven't been tested before will now be tested. They won't hold them to a very high standard on it, but they'll test them at a higher level. So that's kind of our jumping off point, and then Shaheen will take it from there. I'll kind of click for you.
Okay, so just to kind of tell you like how I was kind of piecing this all together, you know, it really bothers me. My wife will tell you, like, I'm always trying to think of, I've got this number of students that just can't get it. You know, they're just not getting it, and that number keeps getting bigger, and I'm just, it's defeating. You know. And you saw the numbers that she put up there, and the freshmen already did their first round of EOCs last year. And, you know, our percentages went to 77%, and I've got history teachers high-fiving me, and I'm going, no, you don't understand. 23% of them couldn't answer 17 questions out of 52 right or 54 right. And so I'm constantly looking like, what can we do? And I'm always evaluating like a lot of you guys do. You guys do a lot of amazing things, and I steal stuff because I live with an elementary school teacher. And she has no idea, like I'll see her doing something and I'll be like, that's cool. I could actually use that in my classroom. Really? This? You know, I'm like, yeah. Because you guys are, you're just real creative. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of places for high school teachers to go. Just go to Mardell's, right? You get to like 7th and 8th grade, and they're fun workbooks, and then it's, we got nothing for you, right? So I was like, what's the problem here? How can I help these students? We went to a presentation. Dr. Molina came in and started talking about how when the third graders take their first real serious test, right? And it's tradition that, and I know some third grade teachers, all this pressure, oh, they got to do so well on this test. And we feel like, we may not say it, but we sometimes feel like, yeah, we got to hang that on that third grade teacher. But what he was saying is, no. The experience that student has from pre-K to third grade is what they're testing. And he said it again. And I go, okay, the experience that, okay, what's he saying? It's not the teacher. The experience that student has had from K through 3 is what they're testing. So in all reality, in a lot of regards, the third grade teacher, there's a whole lot that she really couldn't do, right? And that got me thinking, and I started getting into, I do UIL academics. And because someone came to me and said, hey, you should do UIL computer science because they have that in computer science. I said, okay, cool, what's that? I didn't know, I never did it, never knew what it was. So we went, and my kids just got destroyed. I mean, they got negative scores on the test, and I didn't even know, like, wow. And then I didn't know who I was asking at the time. I was so new to this. I said, what's a good score on this test, you know? And he said 240, so I had to interpret that. What does that mean? I looked it up. It's a perfect score. And I'm like, really? That's a good score? Not like at least a few, you know? Like, anyway, but he was right. And I'd go to these meets, and I'd take these kids, and these kids would get perfect scores, and I really thought they were cheating. I didn't know that material. I was like, whoa, I remember maybe a little bit of that in college, but how did he get that right? And it's trick questions, you know, like trick questions. It's like, what would this, if you did this? And they were doing well. I was like, they're memorizing answers. I was looking for it. No, these kids were learning it. As I went through, I started going, it's the same coaches from the same schools, and they're not holding these students back. So they're getting a new group of students, and they're still doing well. So I started picking their brains. What do you do? What do you do? What do you do? What will you tell me? What do you do? And they all said the same thing. I get them when they're young. I get them when they're freshmen. I start training them up. And so they have a program that I'm seeing. Oak Tide knows it. Our band director, he knows that. He gets them to 6th grade. He's got them all the way up. They know their stuff before they even get there because he's got his hand in all of it. Barrett knows it. Those kids on the football team, they already know the plays. They're not learning the plays when they get to high school. They're just getting better and stronger and faster, and they're just implementing it better. So that's what we want to do. We want to create a program with you guys because we realize the value in the program, not the individual teacher. And we have amazing individual teachers here, for sure, certainly. So, So we must be willing to try new things and be flexible. Because if you can't be set in your curriculum, I know like, if you've got something that works and you, like if you've mastered the entire program and you know your class is like all designated and it works, we should all be doing it, right? Or at least we should know about it so that we can use it. So that's the idea, that we would now put that out there so that other teachers can use it and collaborate. The other thing is, it's really hard, is the textbook is not our curriculum, and that's a hard thing for a lot of, for me it was. Rick Edwards put me in a room one year and said, hey, I want you to write the Algebra 1 curriculum. So, oh, okay. I was like just two years into teaching. It's my second year, and he's wanting me to write the curriculum. Okay. Textbook. Okay, why does he want me to put page 1, all these? I'm just copying the textbook curriculum into this document. That's not what and he said this. He said the textbook's not your curriculum, but I didn't know enough to know what the curriculum was. So it's a resource to your curriculum. It's not your designated curriculum. So what we want is a well-goaled instruction seen by all levels of math instruction. We actually have a way to do that now. You may have got a little folder pop up on your desktop, and it's KISD math right up there at the top. So I don't know if y'all see it. You should see it now.
It's there.
Okay, so it just popped up, and I broke it down by folders for each grade level, so that you guys can start putting activities in there and share with each other.
I opened it and it was like, okay, there's nothing here.
There's nothing.
There wasn't anything there. Y'all have to put it there.
I haven't. I was like, because we were getting together. How do we present this to them? There needs to be some kind of naming scheme that you put in there, because anyone can write to it. Anybody can. And so, what we were saying, just, it'd be best if you put what it teaches, not even the name of the activity.
Just
Like what does it teach?
Adding 2-digit numbers activity or whatever, so that, we don't want to say like section 3.3 activity or, something like that, or, shake them up or whatever the cute name you gave it, but like the actual thing it teaches.
Yeah, what
give
does
that
it
the
teach?
title on
So when a teacher looks at it, they can look and go, oh, that's what I'm teaching. And they can see the name once they open it up.
Yeah.
Okay. And this has been updated. Currently looking into technology solution. We still are. That's not like the idea. The idea is I want it like a web-based deal that you guys can easily navigate and upload to, that
And
does all that
search and
work.
all that kind of
Real
stuff.
search, yeah. But it's Kennedale. It's us, And yeah, they have Project Share. They have all that. But what we're wanting to do is I'm wanting to see it too. Like if you do something in second grade, I want to see what it is. Because believe it or not, I can adapt some of those activities.
Or we can go back and look and see, like, sometimes our kids will talk about activities they did in elementary school. And we can go back and see, like, how y'all taught something or the activity you used. You go, oh yeah, remember when so-and-so in so-and-so's class you did this? And you learned how to do long division or whatever.
Yeah.
It'd be valuable.
Maybe even like start incorporating a little more technology, doing some planning time where we Skype in other teachers from other campuses. So maybe like, vertical alignment is more than just obviously just going all the way up. You can do horizontally. You can go. I would love for, like I do it all the time. At lunch, all the math teachers eat together. So we kind of have a meeting every day. And I'll ask the Algebra 2 teacher, like, how am I supposed to do this? Like, what do you need? Because I got in trouble one day. The geometry teacher came to me and he goes, so when you teach simplifying radicals, how do you do that? And I go, I don't teach simplifying radicals. Oh, well, it's in your text. Yeah. And I said, okay, so do you need me to teach simplifying radicals? Yeah. So I taught them, and the next year I was excited. How they doing on those radicals? They've seen them. I said, okay. Okay, you can't get me there. Well, here's the idea. If we can create a learner that's autonomous and not so teacher dependent, there's a pattern that's not very good, and it's been established since the old day. You teach, they show it to you. Did I do it right? You teach, they show it to you. Did I do it right? We don't want that, right? So the first thing is, we've got to start kind of breaking down mechanization and cognition. Today when I was teaching inequalities, I used to say, okay, which direction does the arrow go? And now I'm going, no, that's mechanization. I need to say, so if x is less than 3, we want to draw our arrow to all the numbers that are less than 3. So they understand the concept. Mechanization has its place. Like you guys drive to work every day, right? And the first time you came here, you probably had to get a map, and you had to like see, maybe you got your GPS, but you couldn't have your radio up. You know, when we start looking for stuff, we turn our radio down and we get focused, right? Because you're having to cognitively think about what you're doing. If you do it every day, you don't have to think about what you're doing, all right? You just do it. Sometimes you just show up and here I am. Oh, wow, how did I get here? What that does, and that's okay because that's a process that you've done so much you don't have to think about it anymore. There's a side effect to it. You stop thinking about any other way to go. Like someone tells you one day, oh, I live over there. Which way do you go? This way. Did you know if you took this way, you could shave 5 minutes off your... Really? Because you were closed-minded to that because you mechanized it. Sometimes we force the mechanization. We want to get there for the students before they've had the chance to cognitively process it. So like, be aware of phrases like, you will always do this. That's forcing the mechanization. Like you're making them jump towards mastery that they don't really have. Now, if they might start drawing conclusions like this, but if we kind of push that on them, it can be trouble. Other things that we say is, this part is tricky. And I just said it earlier. When they hear tricky, they hear, you mean only the most elite are going to understand. Like only the real math geniuses will get this. And they kind of shut down. They do, oh, this one's not for me then. They just said, this part's tricky. Or those star questions are tricky. Now, what do you really mean? You mean listen closely and turn your brains on. But that's not what they hear. They hear this is going to be hard. So I better not do it. Yeah.
I have a question about mechanization. Is it the same thing as like when you're teaching division and you're teaching these steps? I mean, you're always going to use the same steps when you're dividing big numbers, no matter how big they are. That's not considered mechanization, is it?
Like, okay, so you go over a process. But do they understand why they're breaking something up? Like, why are you dividing this up? What is that really
going?
Yeah, so if they understand that, that's not mechanization.
And it doesn't mean that you can't teach processes, because we do have to teach processes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's like the little tricks or the, these claims of we will always do this. Like an example, in calculus, one of the things I have to teach my kids is limits, and I'm not going to get into all the gobbledygook, but there's a trick for this one type of limit that I learned at a summer conference from another calculus teacher, and it always worked until one year. They put a question on the AP exam that trick would not work with because they knew that we were teaching that trick. And that was not what they were trying to test. They were trying to test like a true knowledge and understanding of how to find that limit, not with the trick. They made it nice. They were nice and made it where you could use the trick, but they expected us to have taught our kids the cognition before the trick. And they knew we weren't. So they put one on there that the trick wouldn't work unless you had to know the cognition. You had to know the thinking. So many kids missed it, they ended up not counting it that year. But they put a little note in the, on the answer key. Just, we're giving you a heads up. Like, we know what y'all are doing. Stop doing it. We'll put another one on the test if you don't. So it's that kind of thing. Like, make sure your kids understand the process and the cognition and the reasoning behind something. Hopefully they'll come up with the trick and the shortcut on their own. Let them kind of develop or lead them to the trick through the cognition. Don't just jump to it, I think is what he's saying. Like, don't just teach the trick.
Okay. And then, like, here's an example. I've got one for me that I did this year. And this is one that I kind of picked off my wife. She's taught first in kindergarten. And there's an issue with this kind of first example. the bigger number goes first when you subtract. Like, I totally understood why she did it. Like, I totally get it. It makes sense to me. Because it makes the activity go better, it makes a lot of things. But order does matter. And so, for instance, none of my kids can take 7 from 20. They can't do it. Like a few of them can. When I say take 7 from 20, that means 20 minus 7. Well, what if I said take 13 from 7? Okay, now they're all putting 13 minus 7. That's not what I said. That's in high school. Now, I had to talk with another teacher at Delaney. She said, well, how else do you do it? And I said, well, here's the thing. I'd rather a student set up a problem correctly and not be able to do it than to not set up the problem correctly.
Because it can't be done.
Yeah, because order matters, and well, but they expand on it when they get to 2nd grade, and they'll fix all that. You don't understand. It is so hard to unteach something. I cannot unteach it. It's like breaking a habit, right? I can't unteach it. Once it's out there and it's worked for you, you don't leave it.
So you would say, like, for this activity, we are going to subtract big minus little. We don't want to say we always subtract big minus little.
And you might even make a point to show that process. Okay, here's what the question says. It says, take 13 from 8. But Mr. So-and-so, how do we do that? That means they all know how to set it up. You're right, I haven't taught you how to do that yet, but you will learn how to do that later. So I'm proud of you and praise them for that, okay? I said this year to my students. You can't divide fractions. I said that. I said you can't do it. Because what do you end up doing? You end up multiplying. I was taught that. Had no reason. That's what you were taught to do. You change it to multiplication and then you flip the second fraction, right? You do the reciprocal. We're going to use the math term. And then it's because no one showed me, or I never thought of finding a common denominator for multiplying and dividing fractions. You have no reason to. But if you did, you'd see, oh, it's the same process as dividing and multiplying anything else. Once your denominators are the same. Or you could draw a picture. So, I said that this year. Shame on me. Alright, instead, maybe use phrases like, what is this asking us to do? Have we seen anything like this before? How is this problem different than what we saw in the past? Let them see the differences. Let them look for it. And so forth. Okay? Process versus answers. So, back to process. Process is important. It's the process that leads to answers, so let's emphasize that. I challenged a couple teachers to, like, now it's a little different in the youngest grades, like pre-K through 2nd, but for like 3rd, 4th, and so forth, give them the answers. Like, give them the problem, 3-digit addition, give them the answer, right next to each other. And I had one teacher say, well, why would you do that? I said, why wouldn't you do that? Does the answer matter? Well, yeah, that's how I know if they're doing it right. Well, then give it to them. Let them figure that out. Well, then how do you grade it? Well, you look for their carry symbols. You look for those kind of things. You look for the process. Do they get the process? And now they're getting immediate feedback, right? So give them the answers. Give them incorrect answers. Give them answers with 5 of them that are incorrect. Don't tell them which ones they are. My first year teaching, I had to work the problems before the kids came so I could figure out if I knew it, so I could see if I could teach it. And there was one problem I got to, it wasn't the answer in the back of the book. It just wasn't. And I go, and I had to, like, bite my pride, take it to another teacher and say, hey, work this problem for me. I just don't know. I don't think I'm doing it right. Did the same thing I did. Oh, well, that's not the answer. You got it wrong. No, that's the right answer. The book was wrong, right? To question the book. Oh, man. And the same with our kids, especially when it comes to fractions. If their answer turns into a fraction, I did it wrong. I know I did. It's wrong. It's not a nice number. So provide ways for them to find the answers. And now this year, a teacher over at Alvarado said, you know what? They're not asking me questions like, how am I right? I don't have to answer that anymore. They're asking about process instead of that. And then if you're just giving answers and not expecting them to do process and they still go cheat, they're copying process. Got them. Okay? Take you out of it as much as you can. The more, if you got a student that's got a desire to learn, you all know that's so much easier to work with. Okay. Using previous knowledge or notes, make them use it. Make them. It's so easy to answer their questions right away, but we got to make them look stuff up. My students, as soon as I'm done, they did it today. Finished teaching a lesson. In the binder. Notes go in the binder. It's time to do the assignment. Why? That doesn't make sense to me. So then they ask me, I'm like their personal Google, how do I do that? We just did that for like 2 days. Get your notes out. My notes don't help me. Why don't they? Okay, so try not to answer a question you've already given them an example of. Ask them questions in return. My students really hate this. They've actually stopped asking me questions in some of my classes because he's just going to ask you 3 or 4 questions. Because I'm trying to get them there. And it's a pain. I'll be honest. I have to ask the same series of questions to 14 students. But I do it because I know it's going to pay off more if I do it that way. Let me try to think what I was doing with this one. Okay. This is an example.
You were helping that girl.
Yeah, I was helping a college student at my church. And she said she didn't know how to do that. So what I did was, I said, okay, can you do this? And so I gave her a division problem with fractions. Nailed it. Took it out of the park. Okay. I pointed back to the problem. Now I'll do that one. And she said, no, I still don't get it. I said, okay. Can you do this? 2x minus 6. Yeah. X is 3. No. Can you do it? Can you show me the process? And so she put divide by 2 on both sides. Okay, cool. Now do this. And she said, that doesn't help me. That's what she said to me. What do you mean it doesn't help me? It's the only 2 skills you need to do that problem. And she said, but there's no example of that. You didn't give me an example of that problem. What am I going after? The concept. I'm going after the concept, right? I'm trying to make her apply the concept because if I don't, I'll work that problem. She'll copy my steps, and is she actually thinking? No. Okay. Next.
Trying to go. No.
Okay, miscellaneous. We've gone to the inclusion model, and I'm totally on board with what Ms. Sprinkle is doing. She's our special ed. Inclusion is a big deal. It's hard to do. I do it. I don't know if anybody else, does anybody do inclusion? Some of you, all of you. So it's hard to understand what the teacher's role is in that. There needs to be a unified approach to that, and that every inclusion teacher and every teacher that works with an inclusion teacher needs to understand how much they bring to that table. Anytime that I lose my inclusion teacher because they have to cover a class, and I know that has to happen. It has to happen because of money and stuff like that, but it's not like if you take an inclusion teacher out of the mix, it's not like just taking an extra teacher out of there. It's like ripping an arm and a leg off of that teacher, right? It's literally dismembering a classroom when you do that. Because remember, they weren't, before special ed students were segregated and all that, they had their teachers of their own, they went on their own deal. Now we need everyone involved. So if you are an inclusion teacher too, you got to understand how much weight you carry to that. You're not an extra teacher. You're not someone to just go make copies and just whatever needs. You've got to get in there and dive in with both hands. Teach to the minimum of what we want to teach. You want to go as deep in as far as you possibly can without losing any students, right? You overtrain. That's why I do UIL now, is I take them past the AP test. So that when they walk into an AP test, they're like, I actually got that. That wasn't so bad. And for them to say that about an AP test, that's impressive. So I overtrain. All the athletic coaches know that. You overtrain. You go past what you're going to be expected to do on game day. This was a book that we read that kind of put in a shell what we were trying to funnel around and figure out how to do. And it's got little 8 steps to make some changes, and I learned so many incredible things. One of the major concepts I learned was fact families. Y'all teach those? I used to say to my wife, what's the point? I don't get it. Is it to help them with adding and subtracting and all that? And I mean, I didn't know. I read this book. Fact Families is to help them make part and whole relationships. Which, if you know, now that that's known, we know exactly how to go about the point of teaching that. Because part and whole relationships are a hard concept for them, especially when we get to ratios and stuff like that. So these are just some ideas. And I know it's a Wednesday and we're tired, so did you guys have any questions for us about what we're doing? And
At the same time that we're asking a lot of everyone in the district, we also want to start recognizing the efforts of everyone a little bit more. And we talked about that the other meeting, just having the elementary teachers recognized at graduation, because you are such a huge part. I mean, I can't tell you, how many times kids will talk about something that they did at Arthur or at Patterson or at Delaney. They remember you. You had a huge impact on them. We owe a lot to you because you teach them so many things that are the foundation that we build on. That without that foundation, we would not have any kind of success at all. And
we want to promote you up there.
Yes.
We want to talk about you guys. You remember so-and-so's
Yes.
class. She talks about you all the time. I don't know if y'all feel like I do. They're my kids until they tell me I'm not. You know, they still come to me even after college, saying they want to keep me updated on what they're doing. I bet they do that with you. I want to keep y'all in the loop, right? I want to keep y'all in the loop. I don't want y'all to be like, okay, we're done with that group. Let's get the next batch. I want them to know, like, you're still pulling for them because we know you are. We know you are. And so.
Well, I just wondered, is there going to be something about language arts like this too?
I don't know. We kind of just saw this problem, and Shaheen actually kind of got the ball rolling with Dr. Furman. He was like, "Look, I'll talk to her." I'm kind of like, "Oh, I don't say anything," but he just ran with it and was like, "Oh yeah," she said, "We're good to go. We can do whatever we want."
This is not something that's specific to math.
No.
Yeah, I can so see how to apply, that.
Yeah.
But
And
I just wondered if y'all had anybody at high school level that was like, okay, let's think about the language arts bracket too, because
Well,
you see things.
we see it, and I'll tell you, it's the passion that we have in it because of, I literally have to teach a lot of students that I'm looking at this year. I have a lot that are really, I can tell they're not going to graduate. And I don't know that really, every day that's what I teach. I teach a group of students that I know I can't save.
He teaches
And it
the
bothers me.
lowest,
I teach some really high students, most of my day is high students, but I have two classes and it's like I tell my wife, it's like the parable of the lost sheep. Who doesn't leave the 99 to go save the one? And so 80% of my time is trying to help those kids not drop out.